listener production.
Hello, welcome to the Briefing's Best of Summer series, where we are revisiting some of your favourite and most listened to deep dives from the year that was. My name is Sacha Barbour Gatt, and today it is all about generational wealth, because earlier in the year we learnt that over the next decade in Australia, $5 trillion is expected to pass down through the generations. But who exactly will this money benefit, and what impact will it have on our economy and on the housing market?
The Bank of Mum and Dad is currently the sixth biggest home lender in Australia.
My chat with Compare the Market's Economic Director David Koch, or Kochie, from earlier this year is coming up in the second half of this episode. First, though, time for the headlines from the Listener Newsroom. It is Monday, the 30th of December.
Hey, it's Matt Layton with you. Jeju Air's CEO has publicly apologised after the airline's deadly crash killed 179 people in South Korea. Kim Yi-bae says he takes full responsibility.
Firstly, I bow in apology to everyone who has cherished Jeju Air. Above all, I want to give my sincere apology and condolences to those who have lost their lives in the accident and their families.
Investigators suspect a bird strike caused a landing gear failure, with government probes now underway. Sydney's West is on edge after a man in his 30s was shot dead in Canley Heights last night. Police are linking the killing to a burnt-out car found in nearby Wakeley shortly after. Paramedics couldn't save the man, and homicide detectives are now on the case. Fire-hit workers and traders in Victoria's Grampians can now apply for income relief as the PM visits areas devastated by a massive blaze. At least 4 homes and 11 outbuildings are gone, and more than 76,000 hectares have burned. Relief includes 13 weeks of income support and more aid for farmers and tourism operators. Meanwhile, Western Australia is battling its own out-of-control bushfires. A blaze south of Geraldton has been downgraded to a watch and act. And Labor's grip on power is looking shaky. Voter support has nosedived in New South Wales and Victoria, dropping from 33 to 29% since the last election. Resolve Strategic's polling warns Labor's majority could vanish without a big turnaround before next year. India will need to pull off the highest run chase in more than a century at the MCG to retain the Border Gavaskar Trophy after an unbeaten 55-run final wicket stand between Nathan Lyon and Scott Boland pushed Australia's lead to 333 at stumps on day 4. Marnus Labuschagne telling us there's work to do if they're to claim victory on the final day.
We're going to need to put the ball in the right area consistently, keep putting him under pressure and hopefully come away with the chocolates.
And the Sydney Sixers have cruised to an 8-wicket victory over the Brisbane Heat in the Big Bash.
A big thanks to the Listener Newsroom for those headlines. Next up, it is my chat with Kochie from May, when we spoke about Australia's massive transfer of wealth and the Bank of Mum and Dad. Inheritance is something we usually get on the back of pretty sad circumstances. But increasingly, people in Australia are finding themselves waiting for the cash to flow from dead loved ones so they can get their foot on the property ladder. And those people might be in luck, with the greatest transfer of wealth in modern times about to begin. Over the next 10 years, $5 trillion is expected to be passed down through the generations. Around $2.3 trillion will go from the boomers to their children, $1 trillion to their grandkids, and a further $1.7 trillion will go to charities. It sounds like a great windfall for thousands of people, but there are questions about how it will impact wealth inequality in Australia and how this will widen the gap between the haves and the have-nots. David Koch, you might know him as Kochie, is Compare the Market's Economic Director, and he joins me now. David, thanks so much for being here. Look, we're talking about a huge amount of money here, $5 trillion. How did boomers make all their money?
Mainly through property. Property and just working longer than previous generations as well. And it's pretty incredible considering boomers haven't had the full impact of compulsory superannuation as Gen X, millennials will have in the future. So when those generations get to our age, or the boomer age, they will be passing on even more, because boomers didn't have the advantage of this national savings scheme that everyone's had the benefit of since the 90s.
Look, the question inevitably comes up.
Yep.
Did boomers have it as hard as the younger generations now when it comes to buying a house? I want to know your verdict.
Okay, my verdict is it depends. It depends when you bought your house. It depends what interest rates were like. For example, when money was cheap during the pandemic, I'm going to sound like your grumpy old father or uncle or whatever. I went through 17% mortgages, much lower loan by comparison. And certainly today's home buyers and first home buyers need a bigger deposit and the size of their loan is a lot higher. Now, when interest rates were, a mortgage rate was 2%, my 17% was much harder. Now that interest rates, home loan rates have gone to 6%, it is certainly today's home borrower is doing it tougher than a boomer did back in the 17% days. But this intergenerational argument has been going on for hundreds of years.
Yep.
Believe it or not, when I had hair in my 20s, I felt the same thing about my parents. You're making it harder for us to get into the market. I saw a clip from the ABC, from their archives, of a land and house package sale back in the late 1960s, and they interviewed a couple who'd missed out on the auction. Exactly the same arguments. It was, the older generation, we got outbid by them. How can our age afford a home loan? And these prices, they were selling land packages for $2,000 at that stage. And it's all pretty relative. And that's not diminishing how hard it is for everyone. It's just that when you make a big ticket item like a home purchase, now it is going to be hard. It's hard for everyone unless, you come from a really wealthy family or you've inherited wealth or whatever. For the normal person, it's tough.
Let's talk about the inheritance issue, which you just touched on a little bit. So some experts have described the expectation of inheritance for today's younger people as warping the plans of the young people and what they're looking to do. Yeah. And I think what they're referencing there is the fact that a lot of the younger generations are waiting for that inheritance so they can buy a house, maybe choosing not to save right now, instead going, well, I know I'll be able to buy one day. In fact, I have a friend who said that to me the other day. What's your take on that?
The problem is mum and dad are living longer. That is the big issue. You might be waiting for mum and dad to cark it and get your inheritance, but you're going to have to be waiting a lot longer. But a lot of parents are helping the kids along the way. The Bank of Mum and Dad is currently the 6th biggest home lender in Australia. 75% of parents and grandparents are helping their kids out either financially or in kind, like, doing 2 days of childcare a week. Or a day a week is $150, which is $5,500 a year of savings. So families are pulling together.
What do you think then the impact will be on the housing market as we're starting to see this inheritance flow through the generations?
The housing market's going to be tight for a number of years, not just because of the intergenerational change, but because of the dynamics of the market. Property's pretty easy to understand. It's about demand and supply. We need 250,000 new properties per year just to keep that demand and supply in balance. Last year, we built 160,000. Next year, only 170,000. And building approvals, which is approvals from council, so this is, it'll take you 3 years to build the house, are at 10-year lows. So construction costs are so high, and governments, even though the governments go, landlords are skinning you, grumpy old landlords, they're charging you too much, governments used to build 50 to 60,000 low-cost houses per year. They build nothing today, all levels of government. So don't blame the landlords because they're the ones actually providing the rental properties at the moment. They're suffering from higher interest rates and higher costs as well. Now, if you've got a rogue landlord, a narky one, they deserve to have the book thrown at them. But most landlords are average people, someone from your family, an auntie, an uncle, maybe even your parents. The average property investor has 1.5 investment properties. So they're small people. The biggest sector are teachers, would you believe?
It's interesting.
are the biggest private landlords. But so that's the nub of the problem. The intergenerational shift of wealth will just accentuate it. A big issue is the number of vacant rooms available. That is, mum and dad holding on to the family home after the kids have left. They've got to start downsizing so that can come into the pool.
And I think that's where a lot of the animosity comes from when it's Gen X, millennials, now Gen Z as well, when they're looking up at the boomers and going, you're hanging on to everything. You know, you made the mention of landlords as well. They're the people that are going to be handing this wealth down throughout the generations as it
to their
goes.
kids.
Which leads me to my next question is, who's missing out? Who are the people who are not going to benefit from this wealth that's being built up by this generation?
Okay, it is those that have parents that don't have much to hand down. Those that have parents who have decided, hey, we're going to live life to the full and you're big enough and ugly enough to make your own way like we did and we're not going to pass anything down. So that's going to be the big difference going forward, that there will be a gap. But generally, that's a fairly small number of people. UBS's Global Wealth Survey has the average Australian the second wealthiest in the world, behind the Swiss.
Is that because so much wealth is at the top, though? Do you know what I mean?
No. It's much more evenly spread than most countries in the OECD. Okay. And again, it's property. If you get your foot on the merry-go-round, then it's a winner in the future. A big issue I've found in my family, my son is a classic example, rents a tiny place in Paddington in Sydney and goes, Dad, I can't afford to buy here. So, well, I can't afford to buy in Paddington, but we like living here. And I do the grumpy old thing, move further out. We don't like that lifestyle. So he ended up buying in Brisbane, and it's called rent vesting. So he's got his foot on the property ladder in Brisbane, rents that out, and then rents in Sydney where he wants to live. So you can get a foot on the merry-go-round in a number of ways. It could be, it's as easy also as in your superannuation fund, you have a lot of investment options. You can say, I might want my money invested more in international shares or Australian shares or property, skewing your superannuation fund to investing in property, investing in property shares, some of the real estate investment trusts that are listed on the market and having exposure there. So I don't own any investment property directly because I just think the transaction costs are way too high. Stamp duties, legal fees, real estate. It's so illiquid. Now, if you want to sell, it takes you 6 months.
Yeah, and you're at the whims of, the property market and what it decides to do.
Yeah. Or a bad tenant or vacancies. No vacancies at the moment, but, only 3 or 4 years ago, vacancies were really high.
The question I've seen popping up in this conversation is around who is inheriting the money and who is giving the money, being that the people who are giving the money, the boomers, might have different societal expectations or beliefs or the way they go about their lives. They're giving money to this new generation or new generations that think differently to them. Now, the question's popped off is, well, will this have an impact on society? Do you think it will?
I think the basis is if you're the receiver, be grateful. No matter... You can't say, I'm waiting for the inheritance and I want it this way and that way. I want to decide how you distribute it. Like a lot of boomers will leave a lot to charities. Well, that's their prerogative and society benefits from that, and that's a great thing. So it is an unrealistic expectation. Remember, if you're waiting for the inheritance, it's not your money.
Yeah.
It's your parents. And they've worked hard for it. They started off struggling as well. Everybody wants to live the lifestyle of their parents, when in fact they started with the same lifestyle as you did, struggling, and built up over the years. You can't rush it. You've got to go through the process. You've got to work for it, build career, save up, look at your lifestyle.
Which people don't want to hear.
No.
Well, thank you for being the dad that we all needed. We appreciate it.
I did warn you at the start.
I know.
I did warn you at the start.
No, it's an important conversation. I know there'll be people who disagree with you and the way it's set out.
Like I disagree with my dad.
Exactly. And I think that's the thing. It is a rite of passage. We do inevitably expect more from the generations
and
above us. Yeah, you're right. Thanks for giving us some food for thought.
Thanks for having me.
That was my chat with David Koch from May there. And that is all for this episode of The Briefing's Best of Summer series. We appreciate you listening and joining us over the holiday season. Before you go, if you'd like to share this ep with someone who you think might like it as well, that would be amazing. It's a really great way you can help us keep doing what we're doing here at The Briefing. So is interacting with us on our socials. Check out our Instagram at The Briefing Podcast. Also subscribe to our YouTube channel, search Listener Newsroom, and we are also on TikTok. And we will be back in your feed tomorrow with another Best of episode and headlines from the Listener Newsroom. I'm Sacha Barbour Gatt. See you then.
Listener.